think I heard you advise writers to be comfortable with solitude. And I think a lot of creative people embrace this romantic notion of being alone and creating something.
Mm-hmm.
But how real, when we, because you talked about this earlier, we're social animals and
Mm-hmm.
we're herd animals too. How realistic is that for people to be alone and do what it is they say they want to do?
Yeah. It really depends on the writer. There are writers who are okay with solitude. They're able to be by themselves for many, many hours, days, years, and that's, I like to call it the temperament of the artist. They're people who are meant to be artists because they have the right temperament for it. Even though they're social animals, maybe they're okay with not being social. And so they're able to do this. Other writers are not so able to do this, but you can still be writers and be in a social environment. For example, I know writers who gravitate toward television, not because now television is the golden age of television, but because it's a more social activity. In being a TV writer, you're in a writer's room. You're with other writers. You create with other writers. When I was speaking to Akiva Goldsman for the 101 Habits book, he talked about how he loves the balance of being a writer and a producer. He loves being a producer because being a writer is by himself and alone, and then being a producer, he gets to be on set and being social and be with other people. So it's a good balance. So you could have 100% all social and still be a writer. There's writing teams. Billy Wilder wrote with partners throughout his career. So there's that social aspect of it, being in a room with somebody else. And then there's writers who are okay with being by themselves and write, but alone, and then kind of being social afterwards, with their friends or on the set.
What about for you?
For me, I'm one of those writers who are very comfortable with their solitude. I come from an artistic family, and they're okay with, I guess it's genetic. I'm okay with being alone. So there's a difference between being alone and lonely.
Sure, absolutely.
There's a difference. So, and so that's me.
Do you think that's more embraced? I like how you said that. There is a difference between being alone and lonely.
Yeah.
In Western culture versus other cultures, do you think it's more there is that distinction, whereas I think a lot of Western culture can't understand that.
Right. But it is definitely, it's part of the artist makeup. I think certain people are meant to be artists, not because they're creative, but because their emotional being is able to accept that. There's no doubt that being an artist, you have to be alone, in solitude, to create, unless you have a partner and you're doing it together. But most true artists are solitary, and you're right. In a Western society, it's frowned upon. They will see somebody who's alone as somebody who's like, potential serial killer or something. It's just not. It's frowned upon.
Well, even eating at restaurants alone,
right?
Especially for a woman, they think, oh, she couldn't find someone. Right,
right, exactly.
It is so enjoyable.
There's
but there's such a stigma.
There, absolutely, yeah. That's what you have to live with, yeah.
Right, but so that goes back to the S word, being selfish.
Yeah.
So if the difference between being alone and lonely, and people actually draw energy from being alone, which is, I guess, the definition of an introvert.
Introvert, right?
Is it, again, how do we tie that in where it's not necessarily selfish, but it's more self-care in some sense?
It's up to you. It's how much you can take. It really depends on how much do you care about what other people say. How much do you care about that? I see people, for example, you're right, somebody who dines alone in a restaurant, surrounded by social animals, and they're by themselves, will know that they're getting the stares and the stigma and the judgment, right? But if they don't care, they're going to be okay with it. It's only people who care about. Now, I'll be honest with you, I care. You know what I mean? Like, I would not eat at a restaurant alone, even though I probably would feel, it'd be great to taste the food and enjoy the experience. But because of the fact that I know I will be judged and negatively, I try to avoid that. I also had that problem with going to the movies alone, but now it's less. Now I don't care about movies, but restaurants I still care about that. Yeah. So if I want to taste the food, I would just get the food to go and eat, in my place with the actual food. So I'll get to taste the food. But yeah, because so that's the difference between how much do you care about how much you're aware of what people are thinking about you. That's it, because you're right, it is a negative stigma, you know.